This seems to be the opposite of that. It seems to be so many instances, I think, where wokeness is the opposite of what I grew up as liberalism. Liberalism was, let's give the women an equal shot. This is let's put a male in the swimming pool with the women. I don't get it.
It's crazy. And meanwhile, trans people who genuinely want to compete at athletics and swimming or whatever it may be, they're the ones who are suffering here. They need to be found a way to compete fairly and justly.
Social justice warriors who are fond of governing by hashtag like to say silence is violence. And we know that because it rhymes? The words victim and survivor have traveled a long way from their original usage. The baby from the Nirvana album says he's a victim. He's suing Nirvana for lifelong damages. I never thought I'd have to say this to a baby, but stop being such a baby.
What went down on Real Time with Bill Maher wasn't a debate, it was a takedown. Bill Maher and Piers Morgan tag-teamed Congresswoman Katie Porter and tore through her talking points with cold logic and biting wit. Porter went after swimmer Riley Gaines, saying she should let sports authorities decide on trans athletes. But Maher and Morgan weren't having it. Morgan calmly reminded her that Gaines actually competed against Leah Thomas. She didn't tweet about fairness, she lived it. The moment Porter tried to paint Gaines as attention-seeking, the entire tone shifted. Maher and Morgan exposed the bigger truth. This isn't about politics, it's about reality. What we saw wasn't just TV drama, it was common sense punching back on live air.
He should be able to have a civil debate. Nobody, including Riley Gaines, who I disagree with strongly, should be
What do you disagree with, out of interest?
I think that it should be up to sporting bodies to make the decisions about who and how should compete.
What has she said that's actually wrong?
I think that what she has done is try to turn this. We talked about people, using things to kind of get likes and get clicks.
That's not what she's doing.
It's not?
I've got no truck for Riley Gaines personally, but all I've seen her do is stand up for women's rights to fairness and equality.
Well,
she actually competed against Leah Thomas, and it was obviously unfair. Leah Thomas won one of the races in the NCAA championships by 50 seconds against a bunch of biological females who simply couldn't keep up. That cannot be right. It cannot be fair.
Let's be real. That's the real issue here. Is it hateful to say men and women are biologically different? Of course not. It's science, not prejudice. Yet today, even acknowledging that can get you labeled or canceled by the same people shouting about fairness. The irony? They're the ones destroying it. That's when Maher stepped in and the tone shifted. This wasn't just about sports anymore. It was about how modern wokeness has drifted so far from classic liberal values that it's now devouring itself. I grew up believing liberalism meant giving women a fair shot, Maher said. Now it means putting biological males in their lanes. And just like that, the debate turned into a mirror, forcing everyone watching to face how far the conversation has gone off the rails.
This seems to be the opposite of that. It seems to be so many instances, I think, where wokeness is the opposite of what I grew up as liberalism. Liberalism was, let's give the women an equal shot. This is let's put a male in the swimming pool with the women. I don't get it.
It's crazy. And meanwhile, trans people who genuinely want to compete at athletics and swimming or whatever it may be, they're the ones who are suffering here. They need to be found a way to compete fairly and justly.
Boom. That line hit like a knockout. Because it's true. Liberalism once stood for equality and opportunity, not confusion disguised as inclusion. Title IX, the 1972 law that transformed women's sports, wasn't symbolic. It was revolutionary. It gave women equal chances, equal funding, and a fair field to compete on. Generations of athletes thrived because of it. Now, that legacy is being rewritten. Maher said it bluntly. Letting biological males compete in women's sports doesn't promote equality. It destroys it. The very fairness Title IX built is being sacrificed on the altar of political correctness.
That is something that I think our sporting bodies should be dealing with. And by the way, Riley is speaking up for herself, and that is her prerogative, and I respect her free speech.
I think she's speaking up for pretty much every female athlete in the world.
I mean, wasn't that the point of Title IX? Title IX in the early 70s was something that was it was a major event in feminism, that we finally have this law that says at colleges, right, and I think high schools too, but definitely colleges, women's sports have to be given equal to men's sports so that women aren't and this led to the WNBA and lots of other stuff.
And here's where things really got interesting. Piers Morgan, never one to flinch, threw out a solution so simple it almost sounded radical. Create a separate category for transgender athletes. Fair, logical, and inclusive. Everyone competes, no one's excluded, and the integrity of women's sports stays intact. But instead of embracing that balance, the woke crowd screams discrimination. Since when did fairness become a crime? Since when did acknowledging biology become bigotry? You can respect trans rights and still believe women's sports should belong to biological women. Those two truths can coexist. Morgan laid it out clearly. Either athletes compete according to their biological sex, or we create a new category for transgender competitors. What's not fair is letting a handful of biological males shatter women's records beyond repair. That's not progress, it's regression. And that's where Maher and Morgan hit their stride. They weren't attacking people, they were attacking hypocrisy, the suffocating, joyless activism that's replaced open dialogue with moral policing. Maher said it best: wokeness isn't liberalism anymore. It's about control. Language control, thought control, and emotional blackmail disguised as virtue. Then Maher tore into how words themselves have been hijacked. Hate, victim, violence, phobic, hero, survivor, shame, white supremacy. Words that once meant something now mean whatever gets clicks. Disagreement is hate. Criticism is violence. Silence, somehow that's violence too, but only because it rhymes. Maher laughed, but the point stung. We've blurred the line between discomfort and harm. Feeling offended isn't the same as being attacked. Not everything you dislike is phobic. Phobia means an irrational fear, like spiders, not opinions. He joked, "I've been called commitment phobic." No, I don't fear commitment, I just don't want it. The audience erupted, but the truth hit home, and that's the larger problem. We've turned awkwardness into oppression and inconvenience into trauma. The result, a fragile society that confuses discomfort with danger, and in doing so cheapens real suffering, because when everything becomes trauma, then nothing truly is. And that's where Maher took things from sharp to scorching. He told the story of a CBS drama, All Rise, where some writers, or as he quipped, victims, revolted over a scene in which a naked man steps into an elevator and two women simply keep talking. Their complaint? That's violence. Maher didn't hold back. No, it's not. He shot back. Violence leaves a mark. If you can't tell the difference between hurt feelings and a black eye, maybe it's time to go back to kindergarten. The audience roared, but the truth behind it was hard to ignore. We've lost our sense of proportion. Everything uncomfortable is now labeled harm. And speaking of overblown victimhood, Maher went straight for one of the most absurd examples in pop culture: the Nirvana Baby lawsuit. Remember that? The guy from the Nevermind album cover sued the band for lifelong damages. Maher's response was instant classic. "I never thought I'd have to say this to a baby, but stop being such a baby." The laughter said it all, but behind the punchline was a sobering truth. We've turned victimhood into a competition. Being offended is currency. People chase oppression points for attention, clicks, or clout. And the result? A culture where resilience is mocked and fragility is rewarded. That's why voices like Maher, Piers Morgan, and Dave Chappelle still matter. They say out loud what millions quietly think but are too scared to express. Chappelle especially, and called every name in the book just for doing what comedians are supposed to do: tell the truth through humor. Maher reminded everyone, dog whistling means saying something in code because you're afraid to say it out loud. You really think Dave Chappelle is afraid to say what he thinks? That's the heart of it. Comedy, tomwifhori, and free speech, and we're supposed to challenge, not comfort. But in today's culture, people fear a punchline more than losing their freedoms. Then Maher went for one final nerve: the way words themselves have been twisted beyond recognition. Hate, victim, violence, phobic, hero, survivor, shame, white supremacy, he listed. Once meaningful words, now thrown around like confetti. Everything is hate. Everything is violence. Silence is violence. But as Maher joked, people only believe that because it rhymes. He's right. We've blurred the line between disagreement and danger, between being offended and being attacked, between real injustice and temporary discomfort. When everything becomes trauma, nothing is. And that's the thread running through all of it. From Katie Porter's meltdown on Maher's show, to the Nirvana baby lawsuit, to the All Rise violence complaint, common sense is dying. Feelings have replaced facts. Loudness has replaced logic. Through it all, voices like Maher, Morgan, and Chappelle keep holding the line. Imperfect, blunt, and sometimes messy, but brave enough to defend truth over trend. They remind us that disagreement isn't hate, jokes aren't violence, and discomfort isn't oppression. Because if we keep treating every opinion as an attack, we'll talk ourselves into silence. The only real threat left to free thought. So maybe it's time to stop twisting words and start reclaiming meaning. Maybe it's time to bring back what liberalism used to mean: debate, respect, and honesty. If you've made it this far, here's the question. Do you agree with Maher and Morgan? Should fairness in women's sports be protected? Or does inclusion mean anything goes? Drop your thoughts below. The cultural battles aren't cooling down anytime soon, and something tells me the next round's going to be even hotter.